The pre-dawn chill of October 12, 2003, bit deep into rural West Virginia, where a thick, damp fog clung like a shroud to the ancient Appalachian mountains. It swallowed the winding, unpaved roads, transforming them into treacherous ribbons of mud and gravel that snaked deeper into the forgotten landscape. The only sound that dared to cut through the oppressive stillness was the distant, mournful wail of a West Virginia state police siren. A lonely cry echoing through the hollows. The air, heavy and raw, carried the unmistakable scent of wet pine needles and decaying leaves, a natural perfume of deep isolation. Then, two piercing beams of light struggled to penetrate the gloom, belonging to a mud-splattered patrol vehicle, its tires churning against the unforgiving terrain, followed closely by a battered Child Protective Services SUV. The vehicles pushed onward, their engines groaning against the steep incline and the relentless muck. Each turn on the barely visible track felt like a descent into another world, further from any semblance of civilization. The dense kudzu vines, already skeletal in the autumn chill, formed an almost impenetrable wall on either side, their tendrils reaching out like grasping fingers. The trees, gnarled and ancient, stood as silent, watchful sentinels, their bare branches scratching against the low-hanging mist. This wasn't just a road. It was a forgotten artery, leading deeper into the heart of McDowell County's most isolated corners, a place where time itself seemed to have stalled, preserving secrets the modern world had long since abandoned. Finally, the convoy lurched to a halt. Before them, barely discernible through the remaining tendrils of fog and the wall of overgrown kudzu, stood a ramshackle cabin, its roof sagging, its walls leaning precariously. It looked less like a home and more like a decaying monument to neglect, threatening to collapse entirely under the weight of its own desolation. The sudden silence was profound, a heavy blanket after the vehicles. Struggle, broken only by the rhythmic drip of moisture from the cabin's rotting eaves. Inside the patrol car, Detective Rebecca Thorne gripped the steering wheel. Her breath held. The only other sound was the frantic, accelerated thumping of her own heart against her ribs. What forgotten horror lay hidden within these walls, shielded by generations of silence? Detective Rebecca Thorne pushed open the sagging wooden door, its hinges groaning like a dying animal. The air inside was a suffocating wall of damp earth, unwashed bodies, and something acrid, almost chemical, that made her stomach lurch. Sarah Jenkins, right behind her, clapped a hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and professional dread. In the dim, windowless space, the first figures emerged from the shadows, not distinct individuals, but hunched, almost skeletal forms, their eyes, wide and unblinking, reflecting the weak beam of Thorne's flashlight. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, like puppets on tangled strings. The room was sparse, littered with what appeared to be generations of accumulated refuse and decaying food scraps, a testament to a life lived entirely off the grid, far beyond any modern comfort or sanitation. One figure, older and more defiant, stepped forward, uttering a guttural sound that was less a word and more a primal warning. This was Jedediah Hatcher, the patriarch, his face a roadmap of genetic tragedy, his limbs twisted. The family retreated further into the gloom, their fear palpable, a raw, animalistic terror of the intruders. Then, from beneath a pile of ragged blankets in a far corner, a small whimper cut through the heavy silence. Thorne moved instinctively, pushing aside the grimy fabric to reveal a child, no older than 4, severely emaciated, its skin stretched taut over tiny bones, eyes sunken and vacant. The sight was a punch to the gut, instantly transforming the abstract horror into a tangible, urgent crisis. This wasn't just squalor. It was active, life-threatening neglect. "Sarah, get the medics on the horn, and more units," Thorne ordered, her voice tight with suppressed emotion, her gaze fixed on the child. Jenkins was already fumbling for her radio, her usual bureaucratic composure shattered. As Thorne knelt, gently checking for a pulse, Jedediah Hatcher lunged forward, a desperate, inarticulate cry tearing from his throat, his intent clearly to shield the child. Thorne held him back firmly, her voice low and steady. "We're here to help, sir. This child needs a doctor." But the words seemed to mean nothing to him, his eyes burning with an ancient distrust. This was more than a simple welfare check. It was an invasion, a clash of worlds, and the first tremor of a legal earthquake. How do you intervene when basic human rights are understood so differently? Within the hour, the hollow was alive, with the flashing lights of ambulances and additional state police vehicles, their sirens now muted, their presence an alien intrusion in the absolute silence. Medics carefully began assessing the Hatcher family, who reacted with a mixture of terror and passive resistance. Sarah Jenkins, now coordinating with the incoming units, looked at Thorne, her face grim. "Beck, this isn't just a child neglect case. This is generations. We're talking about a family who's been here forgotten for decades. The legal ramifications alone are going to be a nightmare. Consent, due process. When do these even apply?" Thorne nodded slowly, the chilling reality sinking in. The state of West Virginia was about to confront a profound question about its own jurisdiction and the very definition of citizenship in its most isolated corners. The scope of the Hatcher case quickly overwhelmed local resources, prompting Detective Thorne to escalate. West Virginia State Police Headquarters dispatched additional investigators, and the FBI was notified, given the potential for multi-jurisdictional implications and the sheer scale of the discovery. National databases, including NCIC and state-level missing persons registries, were scoured. The Hatcher name, however, yielded almost no hits beyond fragmented, century-old census records, confirming their profound absence from modern official systems. This lack of digital footprint underscored the family's success in evading detection, posing an immediate challenge to identifying individuals, determining legal guardianship, or tracing any past interactions that might shed light on their origins. It was a digital ghost family. Thorne, drawing on her deep knowledge of Appalachian communities, began interviewing the handful of elderly residents in the nearest hollows. Mrs. Elara Mae Dixon, the retired county clerk, spoke in hushed tones of Ma Hatcher, a formidable woman who had actively discouraged any interaction with the outside world since the 1950s. "They kept to themselves, always did. No one went up Hatcher's Creek unless they had a death wish," she recounted, her voice raspy with age and memory. These fragmented recollections painted a picture of deliberate, almost cult-like isolation, where fear of judgment and a fierce independence had forged a generations-long retreat from society, creating an unwritten law to simply leave them be. A specialized forensic unit from the state police meticulously processed the Hatcher cabin. The conditions were appalling. Layers of accumulated refuse, human and animal waste, and a pervasive, acrid stench. Investigators wore full hazmat suits to navigate the unstable structure, carefully documenting every detail. They found no evidence of modern amenities. No electricity, no running water, only a crude fireplace for heat and cooking. Digging through the compacted earth floor, they unearthed decades of discarded items, rusted cans, primitive tools, and remnants of what appeared to be homemade clothing. While the scene screamed profound neglect, there were no immediate forensic indicators directly linking Caitlin Miller to the squalid dwelling, only the chilling testament to a life lived entirely outside time. Meanwhile, Sarah Jenkins and her team delved into the tedious task of tracing the Hatcher lineage through public records. Old McDowell County land deeds confirmed the property had been continuously held by the Hatcher family since the late 1800s, passed down through generations. Early 20th century census records listed numerous Hatchers living in the remote hollows, often with large families. However, a significant gap emerged in birth and death certificates after the 1950s, suggesting unregistered births and deaths, further cementing their detachment from official state oversight. This absence of formal documentation presented a formidable legal hurdle, raising questions about the citizenship and legal rights of individuals who officially didn't exist. The initial findings from the database searches, local interviews, and forensic examination began to converge, painting a stark portrait of multi-generational isolation. The Hatcher family's deliberate retreat from society, spanning decades, now provided a chilling context for Caitlin Miller's disappearance. Her known tendency to explore forgotten places made the remote Hatcher's Creek a tragically plausible destination. While direct, irrefutable evidence linking Caitlin to the cabin remained elusive, the sheer secrecy and the family's fear of outsiders created a compelling, albeit deeply disturbing, theory. The investigation had irrevocably shifted, now a dual inquiry into profound human neglect and a perplexing missing persons case, both tangled in the forgotten depths of Appalachia. The legal battle began almost immediately, a stark realization for Sarah Jenkins and Detective Thorne. Their initial petition to the McDowell County Family Court, seeking temporary protective orders for all Hatcher family members, adults and children alike, was met with an unexpected, yet perhaps predictable wall of judicial scrutiny. Judge Raymond Blackwell, a man known for his meticulous adherence to due process and a deep respect for individual liberties, even in the direst circumstances, expressed grave concerns. He questioned the state's overreach, emphasizing the Hatchers' long history of self-isolation. While the conditions described are undeniably deplorable, Judge Blackwell stated, his voice firm from the bench, the state must demonstrate a clear and present danger and a definitive lack of capacity to consent before stripping adults of their fundamental rights to self-determination, however unconventional their chosen lifestyle may be. This immediate resistance underscored the profound legal chasm they faced, a collision between generations of fierce independence and modern welfare mandates. The judge's ruling was a significant blow. He denied the blanket protective order for the adult Hatchers. While acknowledging the severe neglect of the youngest child, the court mandated further, extensive psychological and medical evaluations to definitively ascertain the cognitive capabilities and mental competency of the adult family members. This process, Judge Blackwell explained, would be lengthy and require independent experts, not solely those aligned with CPS or the state police. Furthermore, a public defender, Martha Rodriguez, was appointed to represent the Hatchers, ensuring their rights were upheld. Rodriguez, a seasoned attorney from Charleston, immediately filed motions challenging the state's initial assessment, arguing that historical isolation, however extreme, did not automatically equate to incapacitation. Her involvement underscored the state's obligation to provide comprehensive legal representation, even for individuals who could barely communicate, further complicating the intervention. Thorne watched Jenkins's shoulders slump in the courtroom, the weight of the decision palpable. This wasn't a simple case of neglect. It was a complex constitutional quagmire, a test of how far individual liberty extended into the forgotten corners of West Virginia. The denial meant the adult Hatchers, including Jedediah, would remain on the property, albeit under a loose surveillance order, while the state painstakingly built its case. The immediate priority shifted to the children, particularly the severely emaciated 4-year-old, whose urgent medical needs transcended legal debate. For Thorne, the ruling was a bitter pill. She understood the legal principles, but the human cost of waiting, of allowing generations of systemic neglect to continue, gnawed at her. The legal system, designed to protect, was now inadvertently prolonging a situation that felt inherently wrong, a stark reminder of the limitations of intervention in deeply ingrained cultural practices. After the judge's ruling, Thorne knew the case demanded irrefutable evidence. She brought in a specialized forensic anthropologist, Dr. Lena Petrova, from the FBI's Evidence Response Team to conduct a more thorough examination. Dr. Petrova deployed ground-penetrating radar around the cabin and surrounding property, meticulously searching for anomalies in the disturbed earth. The dense kudzu and rocky terrain made the work arduous, but Petrova's team mapped the area, looking for any sign of a recent burial or concealed items. The goal was to find anything that could definitively link Caitlin Miller to the Hatcher homestead, beyond the circumstantial evidence of her known exploration habits. The cabin itself, having been processed initially, underwent a second, more invasive examination, with specific attention paid to soil samples and microscopic fibers that might have been missed in the initial chaos. The very isolation that protected the Hatchers now complicated the search for a missing girl. Dr. Eleanor Vance, the geneticist, presented her preliminary findings to Thorne and Jenkins in a hushed conference room at WVU Medicine. The genetic markers she identified were startling: a severe form of fucosidosis, a rare lysosomal storage disorder, combined with a constellation of other recessive genetic conditions. These explained the profound cognitive impairments, skeletal deformities, and the specific facial features observed in the Hatcher family. That's explained that generations of consanguineous relationships had amplified these genes, creating a unique, devastating genetic profile. It's a textbook example of genetic drift in an isolated population, she stated, her voice heavy. Their physical and mental state isn't just neglect, it's a tragic biological legacy. They were, in essence, trapped by their own DNA, unable to function in the outside world, perpetuating their isolation. This scientific evidence provided a chilling backdrop to Jedediah's desperate protectiveness and the family's visceral fear of outsiders. Elias Hatcher, now housed in a specialized trauma-informed care facility, represented the investigation's most challenging yet potentially crucial lead. Under the gentle guidance of Dr. Anya Sharma, a child psychologist specializing in extreme neglect, Elias slowly began to process his new environment. His communication remained fragmented, a mix of guttural sounds and a sparse vocabulary, but he responded to visual cues and consistent routines. Dr. Sharma employed play therapy and visual aids, meticulously documenting every flicker of recognition or verbal utterance. Thorne and Jenkins observed through a one-way mirror, their hopes tethered to Elias's ability to recall anything about Caitlin Miller. The challenge wasn't just language. It was untangling memories from a mind shaped by profound sensory deprivation and a lifetime of fear. Every small breakthrough felt monumental, a tiny window into the cabin's hidden reality. While Elias slowly progressed, Thorne's team revisited Caitlin Miller's digital footprint. In 2003, cell phone data was rudimentary, but Caitlin's basic flip phone yielded a crucial detail: a series of faint, almost imperceptible pings from a tower several miles closer to Hatcher's Creek than previously thought. The pings were inconsistent, suggesting weak signal or intermittent power, but they established a trajectory. Simultaneously, Jenkins' team, working with the state police's cold case unit, cross-referenced historical land deeds and long-forgotten local hunting permits, looking for any mention of the Hatcher property by outsiders. They even scoured old amateur photography forums and local history blogs, hoping Caitlin might have posted about her planned exploration. The goal was to triangulate her last known movements with any external knowledge of the Hatcher's Creek area, connecting the digital dots that technology, however limited for the era, could still provide. The breakthrough arrived not from cutting-edge tech, but from a painstaking re-examination of the cabin's exterior. Dr. Petrova's team, specifically focusing on the south wall near a collapsed lean-to, identified a patch of disturbed earth concealed beneath a thick layer of freshly grown kudzu. The soil composition, when analyzed, showed subtle variations consistent with recent excavation, not natural erosion. Further digging unearthed a small, hand-carved wooden bird, painted bright blue, an amateur but distinctive piece. Jenkins immediately recognized it from Caitlin Miller's missing person flyer. Caitlin was known to collect unique folk art, often leaving small tokens. This wasn't merely evidence. It was a heartbreaking, tangible link, suggesting Caitlin had indeed been to the Hatcher property, perhaps even left this behind. The implications were profound. Caitlin was here, and the silence of the hollow was about to break. The discovery of the wooden bird intensified the excavation. Dr. Petrova's team, now with renewed vigor, expanded the search area around the lean-to, using more precise tools to sift through the compacted earth. The air was thick with tension, every shovelful a potential revelation. Beneath a deeper layer of soil, entangled with roots and decaying leaves, they uncovered a small, weather-beaten leather satchel. Its condition was poor, but the distinctive, hand-tooled design on its flap was instantly recognizable from Caitlin Miller's missing person profile. Inside, despite the damp and years, a waterproof pouch protected its contents, a worn spiral-bound journal, and a vintage 35mm camera, its lens cap still attached. The satchel was undeniably Caitlin's, placing her definitively on the Hatcher property, not just passing by, but spending time there. This discovery was a gut punch, confirming their worst fears while igniting a desperate hope for answers. The journal, though water-stained and fragile, contained Caitlin's distinctive handwriting, recounting her exploration of the forbidden hollows and her fascination with the hidden homestead. Her entries detailed her initial trepidation, then a growing, almost anthropological curiosity about the Hatcher family, whom she'd observed from a distance. "They're like ghosts, living outside time," one entry read. "I just want to understand." The critical twist emerged from the camera. Expert technicians at the State Police Lab managed to salvage the film. The developed photographs depicted Caitlin's journey, stunning shots of the Appalachian landscape, then increasingly closer, candid images of the Hatcher cabin, and finally, a sequence of blurred, frantic frames. The last few pictures, taken just moments before the camera was likely dropped or discarded, showed Caitlin, her face etched with fear, scrambling away from the cabin, and then a dark, indistinct shape falling towards her from above. The forensic analysis of the final photographs, coupled with Dr. Petrova's re-examination of the site, provided a chilling, albeit accidental, scenario. The blurry shape in the final frames was identified as a large, decaying section of the cabin's lean-to roof, detached from the main structure. It appeared Caitlin, startled or perhaps attempting to get a closer shot, had inadvertently disturbed the already precarious structure. The ground around the lean-to showed signs of a violent impact and drag marks, consistent with someone being struck and then moved. This evidence suggested Caitlin's death was not a malicious act by the Hatchers, but a tragic accident, possibly followed by the family's desperate, fear-driven attempt to conceal her body and the incident itself. The twist was devastating, not a murder, but a fatal accident in a world where logic and law were utterly alien, a world where fear trumped all understanding. This realization shifted the entire focus of the investigation from a potential homicide to a profound, almost Shakespearean tragedy of circumstance. The revelation of Caitlin Miller's satchel, journal, and camera acted like a seismic shockwave, reverberating far beyond the quiet hollows of McDowell County. Within hours, the story, initially a local missing persons case, exploded onto national headlines. Cable news vans, adorned with satellite dishes, converged on the nearest accessible roads, their bright lights piercing the perpetual gloom that now seemed to hang over the region. Reporters, armed with microphones and aggressive questions, swarmed Thorne and Jenkins at every turn, demanding answers. The narrative shifted dramatically from a simple welfare check to a chilling tale of a young woman's tragic encounter with a lost tribe in the heart of Appalachia, fueling sensationalist speculation about what other secrets lay buried in the forgotten corners of West Virginia. The delicate balance of the investigation was shattered, replaced by an unrelenting media circus hungry for details. The public reaction was immediate and visceral, splitting communities and igniting a fierce debate across the nation. Outrage poured in from every corner, with online forums and social media platforms, still nascent in 2003, but powerful nonetheless, ablaze with calls for justice for Caitlin and condemnation of the state for allowing the Hatcher family to exist in such conditions for so long. Protesters, some local residents, others drawn from activist groups, gathered near the county courthouse and the makeshift police command center, waving signs demanding accountability. Yet, a counter-narrative also began to emerge, whispered initially, then shouted, voices defending the Hatchers' right to privacy, questioning the state's intervention into a self-sufficient, albeit unconventional, way of life. The cultural chasm between urban progressive ideals and rural independence had never been starker. The escalating public and media pressure became an almost unbearable burden for Detective Thorne, Sarah Jenkins, and particularly Judge Blackwell. Every decision, every statement was scrutinized, picked apart, and often sensationalized. Thorne found herself fielding calls from national news outlets, while Jenkins fought to maintain her team's focus amidst the chaos, struggling to process the Hatcher children in facilities now under intense media spotlight. Judge Blackwell, known for his stoic demeanor, faced unprecedented calls for his recusal, accused by some of bias, by others of judicial overreach. The delicate legal framework he was attempting to construct, balancing the Hatchers' rights with the state's duty, seemed to buckle under the weight of public opinion, threatening to derail the entire, already complex intervention. The intense media presence, amplified by aggressive reporters and curious onlookers, soon breached the fragile perimeter around Hatcher's Creek. A local news helicopter, defying flight restrictions, buzzed low over the hollow, attempting to capture aerial footage of the cabin, its rotors whipping up dust and debris. Simultaneously, a group of self-proclaimed citizen journalists and thrill-seekers, having navigated the treacherous backroads on ATVs, attempted to bypass police roadblocks, intent on reaching the property for their own exclusive content. This desperate, high-stakes surge towards the cabin forced a rapid and dangerous response from the state police. Officers, already stretched thin, were dispatched in a tense, off-road pursuit through the dense, unforgiving Appalachian terrain, a perilous chase to prevent further intrusion and potential harm to themselves or the still vulnerable Hatcher adults. The discovery of Caitlin's satchel and the haunting images on her salvaged camera sent a jolt through the State Police Command Center. Detective Thorne, her face grim, called an immediate, urgent meeting with Sarah Jenkins, Dr. Petrova, and the lead prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Mark Harrison. The final, blurry photograph, depicting Caitlin scrambling from the cabin as a section of the lean-to collapsed, became the centerpiece of their evidence. "This isn't just a missing person anymore, it's a death investigation," Thorne stated, her voice tight, pointing to the drag marks consistent with a body being moved. "And the Hatchers, in their fear, they tried to hide it. We've got probable cause for their arrest, not for murder, but for concealment of a body and obstruction." The weight of this next step, the full-scale legal confrontation with a family so profoundly disconnected from reality, hung heavy in the air, a stark, unavoidable collision of worlds. Simultaneously, at the specialized trauma-informed care facility, Elias Hatcher's fragile world began to crack open. Dr. Anya Sharma, carefully introducing visual aids related to the cabin, observed a profound shift in his demeanor when shown images of the lean-to and Caitlin's distinctive satchel. His guttural sounds coalesced into fragmented words, describing, quote, "tall girl, loud noise, and Ma Hatcher, pushing, dark earth." It was a harrowing, piecemeal confession, filtered through a mind ravaged by isolation and genetic affliction, but it corroborated the forensic findings. Elias's eyes, wide with a mixture of terror and a nascent understanding, conveyed the primal fear that had driven his family's actions. Not malice, but a desperate, instinctual attempt to erase an event they couldn't comprehend, to protect their hidden world at any cost. Armed with Dr. Petrova's forensic report, Caitlin's journal entries, salvaged photographs, and Elias's fragmented testimony, ADA Harrison moved swiftly. An emergency hearing was convened before Judge Blackwell, the courtroom hushed, devoid of the usual media circus. Harrison presented the evidence. Caitlin Miller's tragic accidental death, struck by the collapsing lean-to, and the Hatcher family's subsequent, fear-driven attempt to conceal her body. Judge Blackwell, his expression somber, acknowledged the compelling evidence. He issued immediate warrants for the adult Hatchers, not for homicide, but for obstruction of justice and unlawful disposal of human remains. The ruling was a devastating legal blow to their isolation, yet it was tempered by a recognition of their severe cognitive limitations, setting the stage for a judicial process unlike any West Virginia had ever witnessed. The judge's final ruling, delivered with a heavy heart, brought a complex and imperfect resolution to the Hatcher family's fate. The younger Hatcher children, including Elias, were permanently removed from the hollow, placed into specialized trauma-informed care facilities and foster homes, equipped to address their profound medical and developmental needs. This decision, while heartbreaking for some, was deemed essential for their survival and any hope of integration into modern society. The adult Hatchers, including Jedediah, remained under state supervision, their choices for integration severely limited by their cognitive impairments and lifelong isolation. Caitlin Miller's death was officially ruled an accidental tragedy, the result of a collapsing lean-to. The Hatcher family, deemed mentally incapable of fully grasping the legal implications of their actions, faced no malice-driven charges for her death or the concealment, only for obstruction and unlawful disposal of remains. A complex moral but legally constrained outcome, reflecting the profound chasm between their reality and the American justice system. The fallout from the Hatcher's Creek case rippled far beyond the Hollow, leaving an indelible mark on McDowell County and sparking a nationwide debate. The community grappled with a potent mix of shame, outrage, and a painful introspection about how such a multi-generational tragedy could have been overlooked for so long. The story forced West Virginia, and indeed the entire nation, to confront uncomfortable truths about deep-seated rural poverty, lack of access to resources, and the ethical dilemmas of state intervention in fiercely independent, isolated communities. In the wake of the case, increased funding was allocated for rural social services, and a renewed focus was placed on outreach programs designed to identify and assist other forgotten families living in similar seclusion. It instigated a difficult, ongoing public conversation about the delicate balance between individual autonomy and the state's fundamental duty to protect its most vulnerable citizens, challenging long-held notions of self-reliance versus societal responsibility in the Appalachian context. The Hatcher's Creek case ultimately became a stark, haunting reminder of the forgotten corners of America, a testament to the enduring power of isolation and the tragic consequences when it intertwines with genetic vulnerability. It served as a critical inflection point for West Virginia, prompting reforms in child welfare and adult protective services, and forcing a re-evaluation of how the state engages with its most remote populations. The story of Caitlin Miller and the Hatcher family echoed across the nation, an uncomfortable mirror reflecting the disparities that still exist. It underscored the profound challenge of bridging the gap between centuries-old ways of life and the demands of modern society, leaving a legacy of questions about what truly constitutes freedom and protection in a diverse, complex nation. If this harrowing journey through the hidden hollows of West Virginia has resonated with you, please consider hitting the like button, subscribing for more stories that challenge our perceptions, and watching our next deep dive into another forgotten American history.